Questions. Number 1. What was your position in the American Army during the period that American Jewish chaplains were involved in aiding the survivors of the Holocaust? My position was that of base chaplain. I was base chaplain in North Africa, Italy, Marseille, and in Germany. However, the only time that I was involved with the victims of the Holocaust was in Marseille, where Rabbi Morris Kurtzer, now of Scottsdale, Arizona, was the chaplain. He aided in a very great measure the Jews who were brought down from Germany. And we were able to help many of the displaced persons in that way. And many of these, of course, were Jews. Question number 2. Who were the American Jewish chaplains under your command? Now, I had many Jewish chaplains in the course of the war, the 4 years and 4 months I was overseas. However, the only one who was intimately and directly involved in aiding the Jews from Germany, as far as I remember, was Rabbi Morris Kurtzer. Question number 3. Question number 3. Please describe the type of activities each one of these American Jewish chaplains was involved in on behalf of these survivors. What mostly was, when they came down to Marseille, he supplied them with food and also some place to live. Now, just what happened after that, I think he did help some of them to get back to some other place, perhaps to Cyprus, I'm not too sure. However, I'm sure that Rabbi Kurtzer, who is now in Scottsdale, Arizona, he would be able to answer these questions. He would be able to tell you who the other Jewish chaplains who were involved with him in this work. Under my command, we had many Jewish chaplains. However, the one who was actually in my office directing that work was Rabbi Morris Kurtzer. Question number 4. Were they involved in receiving packages from the United States to distribute to the survivors? If so, please be specific about what's transpired. Yes, there were quite a few packages and bundles that came from the United States for these survivors, and especially I remember gefilte fish, different types of food, stuffs that were sent over, and I remember the sacramental wine also came in. However, I was only secondarily involved in that insofar as that I was the commander, or at least I was the senior chaplain in the Mediterranean base, Delta base at that time. Number 5, how were these American Jewish chaplains able to provide food and other necessities to these survivors? What was your role in this effort? Well, they were able to, mainly I think most of the food came from the United States that they supplied to these survivors. However, I think some of it was procured locally. I used to help. Remember one time we got quite a bit of chocolate donated, I think 1 million Unicy bars, and we did get a truckload or two of these Unicy bars to distribute to the survivors. However, there was quite a bit of other food. As I say, I wasn't directly involved. I was only indirectly involved insofar I was a senior chaplain, and I cooperated, especially with Morris, Rabbi Kurtzer, in every way possible to see that the survivors were fed and clothed. And I was tremendously impressed by especially some of those who came from Germany, the young men who still wore the sideburns and still wore the yarmulke. When I used to say to myself, well, here these men were willing to suffer for their faith, were willing to, and didn't deny the fact that they were the Jewish faith, and most likely I remember many of them came in. It seemed to me they didn't have a good meal for a long time, so we were very happy to be able to help them in any way possible. What was the reaction of the American Army to these activities on behalf of European Jewry on all levels? In referring to Army personnel, please try to remember names and unit to which they were assigned. As far as I can remember, they were very happy about the fact that we were helping the victims of the Nazi persecution. I don't know if there's anything specific that the commanding officer, the commanding general, Rattay, who happened to be Rattay, General, I forget, George Rattay, I think, in Marseille. But certainly he did not prevent in any way the work which we were doing, which Rabbi Kurtzer and the rest of us were doing for the survivors of the Nazi Holocaust. This was the Delta base section in Marseille, France. What do you think might have happened there if these American Jewish chaplains had not been in Europe to help the survivors of the Holocaust? How could you evaluate each of their efforts? Please be specific. Then this can be off the record if you wish. You know, as I think, of course, the life of the Jewish Nazi refugees would have been much more difficult if the American chaplains, as I say specifically, I only know of him, although I know many of the other Jewish chaplains, also helped. Certainly their life would have been much more miserable than it was. However, camps were set up, as I recall, in Marseille, where these Jewish refugees came from Nazi persecution. And it was in these camps that the Morris Kreutzer was able to supply food and supply other comforts in order that they might continue to exist. Number 9, is there any area that I have not touched upon that you feel should be discussed? If so, please be as specific as possible. Do you have any other comments you would like to mention before we end this interview? No, except that I had great admiration for the victims of Nazi persecution, as for all, but especially for them, because I know the terrible ordeal to which they were put, especially perhaps their parents, and I know many of them had lost all their parents and many of their relatives. And it was a source of great admiration, the courage that I saw among these people, that despite all the difficulties under which they were laboring, nevertheless they were still faithful to their religion. And I cannot help but feel that this feast of Hanukkah, the same thing happened here in the days of Judah Maccabeus. It was the cleansing of the temple and the fight for religious freedom that inspired the Jewish people at that time. And certainly I felt that these Jews who had come down from the persecution in Germany, that they were imbued with the same spirit. Now I'm going to suggest that you write to Rabbi Morris Kreutzer. I'm going to give you his address, and I'm sure that he was intimately involved in this work, and he is the one who could give you perhaps more information than I or anybody else can. If I can be of any further use, I would like to do it. Now this tape, I have 2 machines, and they were down in 129th Street on the 6th floor, and the elevator in that apartment wasn't working for the last 10 days, so I didn't get an opportunity to get down and get them. Finally, I had somebody bring them down for me. As you know, I'm quite crippled and disabled with bad feet. I have 3 toes off 1 foot. And then when I got the machines up here, I found that the wires, to plug in the source of electricity, the one that fitted into the good machine I have was gone. And it's a very special wire. There's a very tiny plug at the end. And you have to go to a special place like Peerless or Willoughby to get that plug. And I don't want to hold up this tape until I get it. However, I think if you want more information, the best thing is to get in touch with Morris Kreutzer. And then I'm quite sure that I saw him, by the way, last month. I was out in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm sure that he will give you much more information than I can give. He was a very dedicated, devoted man, and I know he gave much of his time and his effort in order to help these Jewish refugees and make life as comfortable as possible for them.